The .xyz community is made up of celebrated artists and creative outlets, acclaimed entertainers and designers, award-winning professionals and industry leaders, game-changing communities and organizations, and forward-thinking businesses discovering tomorrow's next big breakthroughs. The word is out, and the world is spoken. .xyz is the domain for the next generation. Build a winning online presence with a domain that knows no bounds. Join the revolution. Get your .xyz today.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 4 of No Code Week. Today, we have an amazing workshop from Bubble, and we will be hearing from Carla, Stickler, success over at Bubble. We are excited to have you guys here and back with us for another day, and continue to check the event space and calendar so that you can see what's coming up next. Today, we have Carla. She will be doing a workshop for Bubble, followed by also a live build by Brand Factory and No Code Makers on the actual product of Bubble and how to actually build that in an hour. Also, we will have a founder story from their co-CEO as well this afternoon. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage and get right to it with Carla Stickler. Hey, Carla. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, you're on mute. Listen, it happens to the best of us. Yeah. It happens to the best of us when we're on tech time, I guess you can call it. Yeah. We have some difficulties. It's all good. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Happy to have you here.
I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, so much going on with Bubble. It's revolutionizing the no-code space, and so many people, like the video shows, so many bubblers are bubbling now and building out cool apps and web apps on Bubble's product. So we're excited to hear from you, and yeah, so welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to share with everyone today, really the power of what Bubble is and what you can do with Bubble. So really quick before we just kind of jump in, I just want to share a little bit about myself. I have a background in performing. I was a Broadway actor for many years. I transitioned into tech because I learned how to code. I found it kind of in a fluke, and I thought it was super exciting. And I was like, I can build my own website with code. That's really cool. And I spent some time learning a couple programming languages. And when I found Bubble, I was just kind of blown away by how quickly you could build things without having to spend all that time learning JavaScript or any other language. And I just kind of got hooked with it. And so I really enjoy now that I get to teach other people how to use the platform and see what they can build with it and how they can kind of grow their companies and startups and things. So I'm really excited to share this today.
Yeah. And you're an avid speaker too.
Thanks. Yes, yeah. I do. I have performed and spoken quite a lot.
Yeah. So if you guys go to her LinkedIn, you'll be able to see like she has a really good picture up. Also following her on Twitter. We'll drop her information in here as well in the stream. But yeah, we're excited to have you. I'll let you do your thing, take it from here, and show us Bubble.
Thanks so much.
All right, I'll see you on the other side.
All right, Laura, I'll see you later. All right, so welcome everybody. Again, I'm super excited to be here today. So I'm just going to introduce you all to Bubble. I really want to just start with the super basics. Let's just talk about what Bubble is. As we kind of mentioned, Bubble is the leading platform to build powerful web apps without code. So we like to think of this as visual programming. So we are allowing you to drag and drop elements onto a page to build the design of your application. And then we allow you to create actions and things based on just standard plain English logic statements. So for instance, I want a bubble, or I want a button on my page to do something. So I would say when button A is pressed, maybe log my user in or navigate to another page. So we allow you to create these really fully functioning dynamic web applications with really simple, plain English logic statements. It's also really open-ended. I think this is one of my favorite things about Bubble. A lot of our users are able to build on top of Bubble. I'm constantly impressed with the kinds of things that our users are adding to the platform, to like the kind of functionality and design that they're adding. We also like to say that the learning curve is a lot faster. When you're building with Bubble, we like to say it's from like 3 to 20 hours to kind of really get the basics of what you can do with Bubble. And once you really understand this logic in Bubble, we like to think you have the same powers as a software engineer, as a developer, which is really, really powerful. Also, Bubble is the only tool that lets you build services like Airbnb, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. So that's really exciting. So why are we using Bubble, right? What does Bubble enable? Bubble is really, really designed to allow you to move quickly, to create something and get it to market really fast. So you can design, you can program faster than if you're writing it with code. You can launch it in a matter of hours instead of months. You're not working on an engineer's time. You are able to really take control of your business and your application. It allows you to, work with your teams. We'll offer multiple versions so your teams can work and collaborate together. And then we scale with you. So as your app grows, as your company grows, and you need more capacity and you need your app to handle more users and more things in your database, we grow with you, which is a really unique part of Bubble. So what are we going to do today? I'm really excited about showing you what we're actually doing in Bubble. Like, how do we use this platform? So we're going to do a really quick rundown of the Bubble editor. And then we are going to build out a to-do app. I love a to-do app. It's super simple, but it allows you to really get a feel for the basic functionality of Bubble. How do we create things in our database? How do we update or make changes to those things in the database? And then how do we view all of that stuff on our page? How do we get all those things to the page so we can, access them? So that's what we're going to be going over today with our to-do app. And then I'm going to point you all a little bit more towards where you can get more learning resources, because like we said, Bubble it's a big platform. There's a lot to learn. Once you have all of that, once you've learned all of that, though, it's really powerful. So we want to make sure that you are set up with where you can find all of these resources. And then at the end, we'll keep some comments. If there are comments in the comments section, any questions, I'll try to answer those towards the end. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to just pull up my Bubble homepage. So if maybe you're coding along or you're building along with us today, or you've built an app before, you're familiar with the Bubble homepage. This is where all of your apps are going to live. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to start a new app by pressing the new app button. And we're going to call this, what is the date today? We'll just call this live training. I think it's the 18th. All right, we're not going to start with a template today, so I'm just going to fill all of this stuff out really quick here, and then we will get started. So Bubble's going to create an app for me, and it's going to give me two options to get started. The first option is going to be a boilerplate page that we offer to kind of allow you to see what is possible in Bubble. If you're like me and you like to kind of tear things apart to figure out how they work, I really recommend spending time with this Bubble boilerplate page. There's a lot of really interesting and important stuff going on here that can give you a really good idea of what you can do with Bubble. But today, I already know what I want to build. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just start with the blank page. So we'll close that out. And then we're going to close out the assistant. All right, so this is our Bubble editor. This is where we are going to do all of our building. Right now, we are looking at our canvas. So this is our design tab here. And this is where we're going to drag and drop all of our elements onto the page to design what our app is going to look like. So for instance, over here on the left, you'll see all the elements that we can drag onto the page. We have visual elements, we have containers, we have input forms, and then down at the bottom, we have these reusable elements. I'm going to talk about reusable elements in just a little bit, and I'll go into more depth about all of these others. But for instance, if I want to say get a button on my page, I can click on button, drag a big old button on that page. We can change the text to say click me, and now we have a giant button called click me in the center of our page. So this button doesn't actually do anything yet, so let's make it do something. So here, if I click on button, click me, and it's going to inherit the name of whatever we call it here. We can always go ahead and change that if we want to be more specific. But let's say I want to make this button do something when I click it. So here I can click Start Edit Workflow. And 1 second. Just getting notes from Laurel in the chat. 1 second. All right. So we click on Start Edit Workflow. And now you can see we have this, we've been taken directly over to our workflow tab. So now that we're in the workflow tab, we have a workflow that's been started for us called when button click me is clicked. Click here to add an action. So now I get to define what I want to have happen when my users click on that button. So if I open this, I get this drop down here that's going to give me a bunch of options. For instance, maybe I want to log my user in. Maybe I want to sign them up. Maybe I want to navigate to another page. Maybe I want to show or hide some sort of elements on my page. So we have a ton of options here, and this is where we're going to kind of define how our users are going to move through the application as they click and do all sorts of things on our pages. All right, so let's head over to our data tab. So the data tab is where we are going to track and store all of the data in our application. So I want you to think about this kind of like almost like a spreadsheet, right? Where we keep track of all the things that we have. Once we have defined that data, we actually view it very similarly like a spreadsheet. So you're going to see we have this little table here. And this table has columns that once we have things in our database, everything is going to live in this database here. But here in the data types tab, this is where we define those types. We define what we're tracking, what we're going to store. All Bubble apps come with a user data type. This data type is unique from other data types in that it comes with an email field and a password field. We hide that password field from you because we like to keep that super secure. But we do offer the ability to reset a password for your users if you need to do that. So here we have our email field, so we can store the email of a user. We can keep track of their modified date, their created date, and then their slug field. A slug is just a unique identifier that we can use in a URL for a specific thing. Think when you go to Facebook and you view your facebook.com profile page, instead of viewing /16xy, whatever your long unique identifier is, mine would probably say /Carla Stickler because I picked a name that was unique to me. So that's all a slug is. We can add more fields to our user data type. So for instance, let's say we want to track our birthday. We can just add a field to the user data type. This field type would be a date. And once we click create, we now have the option to store birthdays. And we'll take a look at kind of what that flow looks like as we start creating things in our database. So I'm going to go ahead and actually delete this because we're not going to use it today. But let's go ahead now and take a look at our next tab. So this is our styles tab. The styles tab is where we're going to design, we're going to create reusable styles that we can use throughout our application. So Bubble gives us a bunch of default styles today. So we're going to actually use those today instead of diving too deep into the styles tab. But I do recommend getting your feet wet as you're playing around with Bubble and creating reusable styles that you can use throughout your application. All right, the next tab here, we have our plugin tab. So this is how we're going to add extra functionality into our application. So think your users, you want them to be able to pay for things with credit cards, maybe sign up for a subscription, do some sort of secure work with money and credit cards. You may want to add the Stripe plugin. The Stripe plugin allows us to connect to Stripe's API, and then Stripe gets to kind of store all of that data for us, but we get to access it through the plugin. All right. The next tab here is our settings tab. So this is how we are going to kind of define what our app is, the basic settings of our app. Here we can upgrade our app to a different plan. All of our apps come on the free plan. You get access to a lot of things on that free plan. We have the general tab here, which is where, if you wanted to add maybe your Google Maps API keys. And then there's a bunch of other things here. I'm not really going to dive too deep today into the settings tab, but again, I really recommend if you do start, when you start building in Bubble, really spending some time and getting familiar with what we do offer in all of these tabs here. All right, so the last but not least tab here is our logs tab. So this is how we are going to track the usage of our application. We're going to be able to view the real-time metrics of how our app is running. Currently, we haven't actually done anything in our app, so all of our graphs are pretty boring. There's no activity. And you'll see more here as we start building. We'll get like a pie chart that'll tell us how much capacity we've used, how the app is running. So this is really going to help you kind of track and manage that as you're building. Okay, so those are our basic tabs here. A couple other things I'm going to show you up here on the left. This is where we're going to view all the pages in our application. Down here is where we're going to view all of the reusable elements, which again, we'll talk about in just a minute. And over here on the right is where we're going to view all of our versions. So we have all apps come with a development version and a live version. We give you access to the live version once you're on one of our paid plans. The development version is where you're going to do all of your building. You're going to design what your app looks like in that development version. And then your live version is what your users are going to be using. We keep the databases separate between these two versions. We like to do that so you don't muddy up your live data with all of your test data. All right, so let's get started building. I'm going to show you what we're going to build today. So here is my very simple, basic to-do app. This is kind of like my landing page. It's not really designed to, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing app, but today is really about functionality over design. So what we have here is a to-do app called Too Much To Do, because everyone has too much to do. And we're going to log in by clicking on that button. My login information has been saved here, so I'm just going to go ahead and log into my app. Once I log in, this is going to pop up on my screen, and you're going to see that I have my list of to-dos here. And in my list, we have a date that goes with when these are due. We have a form up here, so we can add a to-do item. So let's go ahead and say we want to add something to this. Let's see, what do we need to do? Let's get a pedicure because the weather is getting warm. All right. So we'll do that on Sunday, and I can add that to my to-do list, and you'll see now it's been added down here in the order of when my to-dos are due. And then the last thing that this app does here is if we click on this little check mark, it's going to remove this from our list. So let's say I already made dinner, and now it's gone. I went shopping, so now I only have 3 things left to do. One thing that I'm going to show you as we're building is that this check mark doesn't actually delete things from our database. When I decided to build this, I was like, what if I want to add a page to this later? Maybe I want to have access to all the to-dos that I did yesterday. So I don't want to actually delete them from my database, but I need to find a way to track whether or not they've been finished. So we'll get into that as we start looking at our data. All right, so this is what our app does. And then I'm going to log out here. And that's the last thing. So it logs us out. It removes all that information, all of our personal to-do information from the app. And that's it. All right, so let's get started building. I'm going to pop over to my editor. And we're going to go to the data tab first. When I'm building, I like to really think about my data first instead of just start building. I think, a lot of people do this differently. Some people like to build first. I really like to kind of think about what is the structure of my data? What is the stuff that I'm going to be storing in my application? So we already know that we are logging in and we are signing up users. So we know we're tracking users, and Bubble already gives us that user data type. But we also know that we need a way to track those to-dos. Because if I log back into my app, I want to make sure that all those to-dos that I created are stored somewhere, that we don't lose track of them every time we create them. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new type called to-do and click create. And now we have access to a custom data type called to-do. Over here, you're going to see we have fields for type to-do. So these are all the fields that come with any custom data type that we create. They're a little bit different than the user data type. You'll see we don't have an email or password, but we do have a creator field. And we're going to use that creator field today when we decide how we want to show and like what kind of to-dos we want to show on our page. So here we have a to-do, and these are the fields. We have modified date again, created date, unslug. But we know we want to keep track of some other stuff in our data, right? When I log in, I am creating to-dos that have a title and they have a due date. So let's go ahead and add those fields. So we have a title field, and this is just going to be a text field, right? Because I like to think about this as what is my user going to enter into that little input when they create a new to-do, and this is text. So we'll click create. The next field we want to create is our due date, and this is going to be a date. All right, so we now have a way to track the title of all of our to-dos and the due date. We have one last thing that we want to keep track of. Remember I mentioned I'm not going to be deleting these to-dos from my database. I'm just going to be, tracking whether or not I finish them, whether or not they're done. So I'm going to create a field here called done. I'm going to add a little question mark at the end. I like to do this with my fields that are yes, no type, because it kind of reminds me that there's always going to be an answer to this question. It's going to be yes or no. So when I ask myself, is this to-do done? The answer is yes or no. So this is going to be a yes, no field. I'm going to create that. All right, so now I have my done field. The nature of to-dos, right? When we create a to-do, it's always going to not be done once we create it. So we're going to actually set a default here. So the answer is no. When we create a new to-do, we say, is this to-do done? No. So they're all going to default to no. All right, and that's going to be really helpful when we choose which to-dos we're going to display on our page. Okay, so our data here looks pretty good. Let's get started building. Oh, one last thing. I'm just going to show you really quick in the app data tab what this looks like now, right? Now that we've added those fields, we have all of our to-dos. We now have this table here. And you can see we have the done field, the due date field, and the title field. So once we start adding to-dos, these rows are going to fill up with all the things that we've created. All right, so now we can start building. Let's go over to our design tab, delete this massive button. All right, so the first thing we want to do here is we are going to create this little header here. So if you can, when I'm building, I like to give myself some visual references for what things are, so I know kind of what I'm going to be building. And for me, I know that this is going to be in a group, because I've got two elements here grouped together and I've got this border around it, right? So I need a way to hold these elements together. So over in my editor, I'm going to go over to my container elements, and I have this container element called a group. I'm going to just grab that container. I'm going to draw this on my page. And let's see, I'm going to just kind of pull this to the edges of the page, drag it up to the top. And we'll change the name of this. We'll call it group header. And then we are going to, all right, the last thing we're going to see. Then we're going to change the style here, because remember I said I wanted that border. So here under style, I'm just going to grab a group border, which is a style that Bubbles created for me. And now you'll see if I click out of it, you can see that little border there. All right, so now we have our group. And we just need to add those elements into this group. So over here we have a text element and we have a button. So under my visual elements, I'm going to grab a text element. I'm going to draw this on the page, and I'm just going to write too much to do. Cool. All right, so now we have our too much to do I don't particularly love that. So let's go ahead and change the style. We're going to pick H1 heading dark. And then the last little thing here I'm going to do is I want to keep all of the elements of the style, but I'm going to remove the style. Oops, let's see what happened here. It's a little small. There it is. Okay. So now we've removed the style, but what it's done is it's brought up in the editor the option to edit the style. I just want to go ahead and center align that so that my text is centered up in that inside of that text element. So I'm going to right click here on the element itself. I'm also going to center it horizontally. You'll see now it's centered inside the group. And we're going to also center it vertically. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's add our button. And this button is just going to say login, sign up. All right, and we'll also right click there and we will center it vertically between the top and the bottom. Now we need to add an action to this login sign up button. When I click this button, I need something to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here again. I'm going to start and edit a workflow. And I'm going to click here to add an action. The thing I want to do here is I want to show that pop-up, right? Let's take a look at what this is going to look like. If I click here, it brings up this login sign up pop-up, right? It comes with the sign up form, the login form, and a reset password. So I need a way to view that. Bubble gives you this option for element actions, and we want to show an element. Now, one thing you're going to notice is I don't have a login sign up element to show yet. So we need to go and figure out where we're going to get one. Bubble actually gives us a reusable element called sign up login pop-up. So let's take a look at that. And this is that element. It's created for us. It comes with all the workflows to get logged in, signed up, reset your password. So we actually don't have to recreate the wheel here. We're just going to go ahead and use this pop-up because it has everything that we need already made for us. The only thing we need to do is we need to get it on our page. So I'm going to go back over to my index page. And reusable elements behave just like other elements, except that they kind of live in their own page area, but it's not actually a page in your app. So here, if I go down to reusable elements, I see I have sign up login pop-up, which is that reusable element that we just looked at. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to draw this on my page, just like I would a button. And now you can see I have access to this pop-up, this sign up, this reusable element. If I scroll over it, you'll see I can't actually make edits to it here. I have to go back over to the element itself to edit if I want to change any design elements or actions or anything with this element. But we have it. I'm going to click outside of it. It's going to look like it went away. It's not. It's still here. If we go to our element tree, we can view everything that's on our page. It's just hidden because pop-ups are hidden by default. All right. So we know that we now have it on our page. So if we go back to our workflow and I click here, I click show an element. If I click on this dropdown, you'll see I now have access to that because it lives on this page. So here I'm going to click show sign up login pop-up A. All right, so now we're going to kind of move into something a little bit more advanced. So we're going to talk about conditions. So here, when I click on this button, I'm not a logged in user, right? I'm currently signed out of this application. Once I log in here, this button actually says log out. It doesn't say sign up, log in, because I'm no longer a logged out user. I'm actually a logged in user. So when I click on this button again, it's not going to show me the pop-up. It's actually going to log me out of my app. So I need to think about how can I create some sort of logic in my app that creates a condition where I do something differently based on the state of my user. Is my user logged in or are they not logged in? So here what we're going to do is on step 1, we have an only when option. So we are going to show this pop-up only when the current user isn't logged in. So now we know that this pop-up will only be shown if we're not logged in. We can now add another action right after it. And this is going to be an account action called log the user out. And again, we have this only when option. We're only going to log the user out when our current user is logged in. So this way, when we're not logged in, we see the pop-up. When we are logged in, we log out. Now, the last little piece of this conditionality is we need to also tell this button, what is it going to what's the text of this button going to be based on if we are logged in or not logged in? So the default for this button is going to be login sign up. The condition we're going to add here under our condition tab is going to be define another condition. And we're going to say when our current user is logged in, the text of this button, we're going to delete login sign up, and it's just going to say log out. So now we have this condition here. So when this is true, when our current user is logged into the app, this text will say logged out. If that condition here, this when condition, is not true, we're going to go to the default, which is going to be login sign up. All right, so let's go ahead. We drew a lot of stuff on our page. We made a lot of stuff happen. Let's take a look at what this looks like. So we're going to preview this in the editor or in the browser. So I can just click on preview and it's going to load my app. All right, so you'll see we have our app here. One thing I want to point out real quick that's a little bit different. Note it, our group here doesn't actually expand the entire width of the page. So I'm going to really quick just make a change. We're going to go back to our editor. See how this one expands all the way across? I'm going to make the page of my app fixed width. So I'm just going to click this box here that says make this element fixed width. What that means is my entire page is going to be 1080 pixels, no matter how big my browser is. Right now, my browser is a little bit over 1080 pixels, which is why when we view this, it's stretching to fit the width of the page. However, I want it fixed so it doesn't stretch, so it isn't responsive. However, if you are building mobile apps, or you want your app to be a little more responsive based on the width of the page, you can play around with whether or not you want certain elements fixed width, or if you don't want them to be fixed and you want them to adjust to the width of the page. For us today, though, we're going to make this whole page fixed width. So now if I go back to my browser, I can refresh the page and we should see this adjust to 1080 pixels. Great, perfect. So now we have 1080 pixels. All right, so now let's check our actions. Let's see if our login sign up works. So here I'm going to click on login sign up. Great, so we know that we're not logged in. So it says login sign up. We click it, it pops up this pop-up to sign up. So I don't have any accounts in here. So I'm going to create an account real quick. Sign up. Chrome is going to throw me some errors because it doesn't like my password. All right, so now we know that I am a logged in user because this now says log out. So we know that our condition is true because that button says log out. Now, if I click on this button, let's see if our second action works. It should log us out. Awesome. And we know that it logged us out because that condition is no longer true, meaning that this now is going to the default and it's login sign up instead of log out. All right. Now let's see real quick, let's go to our data and let's just see what that looks like. So remember we just created our first thing in the database. That's the user that I just created. We now have something to show in our table. This is the user I just created. Still, we have no to-dos. So let's work on that. All right, so we know how to log in, sign up. When we do this in this app, this here is going to appear. So remember I was talking about how I like to add borders around elements to kind of give me an idea of what they are. Again, we have a group here with this border that's going to have a bunch of elements inside of it. So let's get that group on the page. Over under containers, I'm going to grab group. I'm going to draw this group nice and big on the page. I'm going to make sure that it clicks to the sides. So it's the entire width of our page. And then I'm also going to set this to group border so I can see the border around that group. All right, so now remember we just worked with conditions. We're going to add a condition now to this group. When I'm not logged in, this group, I do not want it to be visible. I do not want to see it on the page. It should be nowhere in sight. So I want to make sure that if I load my page, the default here is not going to make this group visible. So I have this option, this element is visible on page load. I want to click uncheck that. So now this group is not going to be visible on page load. So let's add a condition to decide when we want to actually show this group. So here, if I click when, I can say when a current user is logged in, this element is visible. I'm going to just check that little box there. So now I'm saying when this condition is true, when our user's logged in, we're going to show this element. Everything that's inside of this element is going to inherit this. So that means everything inside will also be visible if this group is visible. If this group is invisible, everything inside of this group will be invisible. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's actually just test that out real quick in the browser. We should see that group now because so we're not logged in. So if we log in, we'll use that user that I just created. All right, cool. So we know that we're logged in now, and we know that condition worked because now we can see this group. We've got that border there. So let's add some stuff into this group. So what do we have? We have today's date. We have this form. We have a little text element here, and then we've got this list of things. So let's get that date here on the page. I'm going to grab a text element. I'm going to draw this here. And we're going to insert dynamic data here because I want this date to be dynamic and that I want it to change based on whoever is, looking at the browser, what day it is. This should dynamically change. So we're also going to format it here. We're going to pick the full date because I want the full date to show. And then you can also see it's going to display in the current user's time zone. So if you are in another country or another time zone than me, you're going to see this in your time zone, in the time zone of your browser, instead of my time zone. So I'm going to close this now. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's leave that there. Let's get our form up. So we need a way for our users to be able to add to-dos, right? To create those to-dos in our application. So over on the left here, we have input forms. I'm going to click on input. And I'm just going to draw an input element here. And we're going to give this a placeholder called title. We're also going to make sure that this input cannot be empty. So I'm going to just check that little box there. What that looks like here is, say I want to add a to-do and I haven't filled this out. We get a little red line around there. So it'll require us to fill these out in order to trigger the action connected to this button. All right, so I've clicked on this input should not be empty. That looks pretty good. Let's get another element up there. We're going to do a date time picker. I'm going to draw this date time picker here on the page. Let's kind of match that to the edge there. Great. All right, so now we've got a date time picker. Again, same thing. I'm going to make sure that this input element should not be empty. And then let's add a button so we can trigger a workflow. And we'll make this the same size. There we go. And we'll just call this create to do. All right, so now we need to, with this form, we need a way to store the information from these inputs into our database. So that's where this button here is going to come into play. We're going to start, edit a workflow on the button. So when that button is clicked, we want to say, click here to add an action, and we want to do something. So what we want to do is we want to create a new thing in our database, right? We want to save that to do. So when we're creating something new, we go to data things, and we have this option, create a new thing. So I'm just going to click on create a new thing, and over here, this property editor is going to pop up, and it's going to say, okay, great, you want to create a new thing? What's the thing you want to create? What kind of type is that? What kind of data type is that? So the data type of thing is the to-do. And then we have to tell it, how are we going to set those fields? Remember, we created those fields, the title field, the due date field. This is going to say, okay, we can create a new to-do, but we need to know where to get the values. We need to know where that information is coming from. So we see these fields here. So we're going to say, okay, let's set the title field equal to, now we have these options here for those input elements that we added on the page. So the title field is going to equal the input title's value. So now we have a way to view the value of whatever our user put into that input element. We're going to set another field because we also want to store the due date. So we can click on due date field is going to equal whatever our user puts into that date time picker A's value. All right, we don't have to set the done field because we set that default to no. So we can just kind of leave this alone. And that's going to create our new to-do. We do want to add one more action here. This is an element action. And what this action does, we're going to click on reset inputs. Reset inputs is going to reset those inputs. Basically, we create a new to-do instead of leaving the data or the name, the title, or the due date in those inputs. It's going to reset them. It's going to clear them out. So next time we go to create a new to-do, we don't have to delete anything. We're not going to accidentally create multiple to-dos of the same thing. This is a really handy little action here. All right, so that looks pretty good. So now we have a way to create our to-dos. So let's go ahead and create a to-do on our page. I'm going to refresh this. We're still logged in. All right, so we're logged in. Now we can see that we have our form. So the title here, let's say we want to grocery shop. I always need a grocery shop. All right, we're going to do this on Saturday. So I'm going to click Create To Do. Now, nothing happened. Well, it looked like nothing happened. Mostly nothing happened because we haven't actually created a way to display that to-do on our page, but that to-do should have been created. So we can check that by going to our database, clicking on our App Data tab. Let's refresh this. And now under all to-dos, we should see that to-do that we just created. If that action worked properly and I click this button, now I have something that I've created in my database and I can see it. We have under the done field that default no, the due date that we picked out of the date time picker, the title that we put in the input, and then created by me because I was the logged in user when I created this. We can also edit this if we want. Maybe we want to change the default, the done to yes. We're not going to change that right now, but we can edit these if we need to. Okay, so we now have a way to create things. We know that it's working. Let's go ahead and show that group again, because remember, it's hidden by default. So now we need a way to display the to-dos from our database that we're creating. Bubble gives us this option, container option called repeating group. I'm going to click on repeating group, and I'm going to draw this here on my page. Okay, so with repeating groups, the important thing here is we have to tell the repeating group what type of content this is. What is this? What are we displaying here, right? For us, we know that we want to display to-dos. So I'm going to click on to-do. And then the next thing here is data source. We need to tell this repeating group where it's going to get that data from. So we're going to click here and we're going to do a search for. All do a search for means is go to my database, search my database for the things that I want you to search for, and then bring them back to this element so I can display them on the page. So I'm going to do a search for my database, and the type of thing I want to search are going to be the to-dos. So now right now, as is, this is going to return every single to-do in my database that I've ever created or that anyone has ever created. Now, I only want to view the to-dos that I have created. As a signed in user, I should only view my to-dos. So here I'm going to add a constraint. And the constraint here is going to be created by, right? Remember, we have a created field on everything, on all the data types that are created by us. So I can do created by equals the current user. Now we're going to add one more constraint. This is going to use that done field, right? It's going to be no if we haven't finished the to-do. It's going to be yes if we have. So I want to make sure that I only view to-dos where that done field is going to equal no. This way, anytime my to-dos have yes under that field, I'm not going to return them to the page. They're not going to show up in this repeating group. All right, this looks pretty good. I'm going to just change this to 5. We'll get a couple more, another row in there. Let's go ahead and change this again to standard repeating group style so we get that border. All right, so now we have this repeating group. We know that we're going to return all of the to-dos ever created to this repeating group. However, we now need a way to view those to-dos. Each cell in the repeating group represents one thing returned in that list of things from the database, right? We did a search, we returned a list of to-dos. But right now we don't have any elements inside of these cells to display the to-dos that are going to live in those cells, right? So one cell is going to represent one to-do, the next cell is the next to-do. We want to view the title, right? Here, if I click over here, I'm viewing the title of this to-do. I'm viewing the due date of this to-do. So we're going to grab a text element over here, and we're going to just draw this inside of this first cell. And as you can see, it repeats in all the cells. So now every single cell is going to access one to-do. If I click on Insert Dynamic Data, we now have an option called Current Cells To Do. So this is going to be the cell of whatever cell we're looking at. We want to view the current cells to do's title. Again, I'm going to change the style to heading to dark. I'll just kind of change that up. We'll center it all. Oh, that looks pretty good. All right, so now we also need to view the due dates. We'll just draw another one of these here. And this will insert dynamic data again. We're going to view the current cell's due date. I'm going to change that to H2 heading dark. And then I'm going to do that same thing I did before where I'm going to remove the style here and I'm going to right align it. So now it's just kind of adjusted to the right. I'm going to move this over a little bit. All right, so that looks pretty good. We now have a way to view the title and the due date of the to-do that lives inside each cell. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to refresh my page. Now, because we have one to-do in our database, we should see one thing. Awesome. And here it is. We can see our to-do. Perfect. So I'm going to do one more thing here that I forgot to do. In my search for these to-dos, I'm also going to sort. We're going to sort by the due date field. We want to make sure that we view these in order. Otherwise, it's just going to return everything from the database. So now we have a way to sort them. That looks good. Okay, so we now have a way to create our to-dos. We have a way to view the to-dos on our page. Now we need a way to make a change to the to-dos. We want to change that field, right? If I click on this checkbox, it's going to remove this from my list. So here, I need to add an element to click on. So I think that's just an icon element. Yep. We're just going to grab an icon here. We're going to draw it on the page. Choose a little checkbox or a little check mark. All right, so now we have a check mark. And here I'm going to double click to start edit a workflow. Now this is called icon fafa check. You can change the name of that. That's just the name that this check comes with. So we're going to create a workflow here. So when I click this check, I want to make a change to the to-do that I clicked on in that cell. So here we have data things, make changes to a thing. And then because we're working with the repeating group, we have the current cell's to-do, and the field we're going to change is done. We're just going to flip that from no to yes. So once we change the field to yes, it's no longer going to fit the constraint that we put on the search for what we're returning to that page, and it's going to remove it from our repeating group data. All right. And that's it. We don't actually have to add anything else there. So this is pretty good. We've actually got all of our functionality working here. Let's go ahead and preview this. All right, so we've only got one thing here. Let's add another thing. Let's get vaccinated because everybody should get vaccinated. All right, and we'll do that on Saturday as well. All right, so now we have 2 to-dos on Saturday. Let's put something, let's make dinner tonight. We'll get that on today so we can see the order for that sort we put in. Great, so now we've got that sort, right? They're sorting in descending, so the most recent ones, the ones we have to do sooner. All right, so this looks pretty good. Let's now remove something. Let's say we already got vaccinated. If I check on this, click on this checkbox, it should disappear. Awesome, so I can remove everything. Now, that's really cool. It works perfectly. Let's just take a look at our database so we can see what that looks like. I'm going to refresh this page again so I can refresh my data. You can also click that little refresh data thing at the bottom. Once this loads, all right, so here we'll view all of our to-dos. Cool, so we have those 3 to-dos that we created. You can see under this done field, we have 1 that's not been done and 2 that have been done. So they still exist in our database. They haven't gone anywhere. But these 2 that are done, they say yes, they're no longer showing up on our page because they don't match that constraint. So that looks pretty good. We've got the 1 user we created. If we create more users, they're going to live in here as well. And the last thing that this app does, we're going to just log out really quick, make sure that that data persists after we log out and then log back in. So we'll log back in. Right, and that data all persists. So everything that we create, it stays in our database. We can log out, we can view it again when we log in, we can create new things, we can change things. If we wanted to say delete something, we could very simply just add an action to delete it. Let's say here, instead of making a change, we wanted to delete, we could go data things, delete thing, and we could delete that current cell's to do. I'm not gonna do that because I wanna keep them. But if we wanted to add that last piece of functionality and how to delete things, that would be how we would do it. All right, so that is the end of my demo. We have fully built a fully functioning app from beginning to end with Bubble. now I really quick just want to talk about some resources, how you can start learning and building with Bubble. On our Academy page, we do offer a lot of interactive tutorials. We do also have a lot of videos. We've been creating a ton of quick tip videos. We have a full walkthrough of a recipe guide app that you can build from beginning to end. We are constantly adding more video tutorials, so I really recommend checking those out, building along. The other thing, under our Academy page, you'll find we do have access to boot camps and private one-on-one coaching. The boot camps are more if you're looking for a structured learning environment. They last about 1 to 2 months. And the one-on-one coaching allows you to work one-on-one with a coach on something specific in your application. You can also find our documentation there, which is, a plethora of knowledge. It's really, really helpful if you're looking to build certain things, how to build those things. The other thing that I want to tell you about is our forum. The forum is, I think, one of the best places to learn how to use Bubble. It is a large community of expert Bubble users who have been building in Bubble for years and have really mastered the platform and are building really large, dynamic applications who are able to offer support to, people of all levels. It's a really great way to learn how to add more custom features to your app and get familiar with, what other people are doing and building. The best way, though, I think, to learn Bubble is to really just start building. Open up an editor, pull up a free plan, and just start making things, test things out, really get yourself in there, digging around and feeling out how everything works. I'm going to also put up here the last thing. This is how you can contact my team if you do have questions, support@bubble.io. That Academy page is going to be bubble.io/academy. And then you can also find more resources on bubble.io/support. We do have frequently asked questions there, as well as how to submit a bug report. If for some reason you think you found a bug in Bubble, we are more than happy to take that, investigate it. Our goal at Bubble is to really keep the platform running as best as possible for our users. If you have an idea for something you'd like us to add to Bubble, feel free to reach out, let us know. We're always adding new features. We like to think that Bubble is growing with our users. As our users grow, we grow as well. So feel free to reach out directly to us. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. We have a little bit of time left. I just wanted to see if there were any comments. I'm just going to pull that up here.
I'm back.
There you are. Hello.
Yeah. Welcome back to the other side.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Great information and really easy to follow. And you did a great job just explaining each piece and each element of the build. And I think this is very helpful for people to go off of. I also had a couple questions just to kind of, circle back on, just get a little more detail. What would you say how Bubble compares to like traditional like website builders like Webflow or WordPress, Squarespace, or Wix? Like what's different? How does it compare?
I think the main difference between Bubble and those other platforms is how dynamic Bubble is and how open-ended Bubble is, right? We really allow you to take what Bubble offers and then add whatever you want onto it. Because Bubble is built with JavaScript, we allow some of our expert users to go in and add their own JavaScript. There really are not major limits to like what you're able to build with Bubble, which I think is one of the really impressive things. While we say Bubble isn't really built for building web apps, we have users that wrap their Bubble apps in wrappers and get them up on the App Store. So like our users are always amazing me with like what they're able to do with Bubble. It's really impressive.
Yeah, that's great. It's very functional and easy to use for people. That being able to drag and drop is a much needed feature. I think in any type of, whether you're building a web app or if you're building something coming from Shopify into like TapCart, right? Mm-hmm. So now how would you say like, does Bubble compare to like traditional language and frameworks like JS or CSS or React or Ruby on Rails?
Sure. Yeah, I think the thing that I really love about Bubble when I first started learning is that Bubble really does follow basic programming. We just do it in a way that's really user-friendly. So everything we went over today is, basic CRUD. In programming, we call it CRUD, right? We create, we read, we update, we delete. And when you learn any programming language, you're learning how to access the data. Everything is kind of based around these like 4 main principles. And Bubble is the same way. We're doing all of those things. We're really teaching our users how to program and be developers, in the same way that you would if you were learning a programming language. You're just not spending all this time trying to understand what is a function, what is a variable, how do states in React work? I think what's nice is we kind of remove all of that really complicated stuff and break it down into a really nice, easy to use, and easy to understand flow while you're building. But it does, we really are letting you do pretty much the same things that you would do if you're building with Ruby or JavaScript,
Yeah. And one last question. So out of all the great features that Bubble has in working for Bubble, what would you say is your favorite feature when using Bubble? What's your favorite feature?
So I think one of my favorite features is actually using custom states in Bubble. It can be a little more complex, but it allows you to save temporary data on your page. So if you're working with a pop-up form and you want to make sure that the data on your pop-up form is always there, you can kind of create this imaginary custom state of your page where you can save information without having to save it directly into your database. And then you can make sure that you can access it throughout your app. It's a really cool feature that allows you to really do a lot of more complex things with Bubble, which is why I like it. I think it's really fun. And once you really get into using custom states, I think it can really open up a lot of doors for what you can do with Bubble.
Wow, there's so much to do, right? There's so much you can do, and you can use those forums that she mentioned. You can get support from Bubble as well. Is there a place where people can actually work with someone from the Bubble team and actually have Bubble build it for them out their idea?
So our team doesn't actually build apps for our users. We're more of a support. We want to support our users as they build their apps. We want to kind of empower our user base to build on their own. Yeah. But we do offer other learning resources on our Academy page if people want one-on-one coaching. This is a new thing we recently added to the platform. We hire really expert Bubble users who are able to market themselves on our coaching page and offer that support.
Yeah, well, listen, Carla, thank you so much for sharing this with us. This is great information. Find out more, go to bubble.io, check them out. There's a lot to get from this. We really appreciate it. There's so much more to come. Keep in mind, if you go and set up your free profile on startupstarter.co/join, you will be able to get up to $2,000 in credits for the first 3 months on Bubble. So check that out, join today. And then also we have a great influencers coming up next. We have Doc Williams of Brand Factory and Stephen Campbell coming up from No Code Makers, and they'll actually show you how easy as well, on top of what she's already showed you, how easy it is to build out a Bubble app. So make sure that you join. That is from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Carla, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you speaking even more, and then maybe we'll see you on Broadway.
Oh, maybe not. Those days are over.
Yeah, Bubbles taking up your time now, so you gotta,
Yep.
But you gotta get in the mirror and practice sometime, right?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for being here today, and we will see you again soon.
Great, thanks. Thank you so much for
No
having
problem.
me.
Again, my name is Laurel Scott, co-founder and head of platforms and partnership at StartupStarter.co. Get your free profile today. Don't forget to join the rest of the sessions. We have a great founder story coming up from Emmanuel, the co-CEO of Bubble. So do not miss that today. More to come. We have a whole nother week of live events, panels, all of that. So make sure you stay tuned and get all the information and soak it all in once here on Startup Starter TV presents No Code Week. We'll see you guys again soon. Take care. Bye.
The .xyz community is made up of celebrated artists and creative outlets, acclaimed entertainers and designers, award-winning professionals and industry leaders, game-changing communities and organizations, and forward-thinking businesses discovering tomorrow's next big breakthroughs. The word is out, and the world is spoken. .xyz is the domain for the next generation. Build a winning online presence with a domain that knows no bounds. Join the revolution. Get your .xyz today.